So we have about 15 minutes to respond to some questions. Any questions, please?
Good morning, Grace Marcos from McGill University. A number of the speakers have spoken about time for women and originally the idea of time poverty and then measuring time. I just wonder if we could hear a little bit more about the challenges of measuring time for women and the last speaker, the capability of women to recall what happened over the last 24 hours and what was gained, what was lost.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. For the last speaker, could you just mention how you control for seasonality in that just the scenario where the demand for labor is coinciding with actually low food stocks and food supply? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sudha. I had a question about for Alessandra. In this milk study in Tanzania, has there been any consideration of using more fermented milk products, for the spoilage issue? Just in terms of, what type of milk products do the communities consume?
Hello, this is Fiorella Piccioni from University of Reading. I have a question for Carly and one for Vidya. So Carly, you talked about the role of women in productive labor. Could you tell us more about your work on the social reproductive duties and the perception of time burden by the women? And for Vidya, it was an impressive work. It's really, really fantastic amount of data. Have you also collected time use, especially for women during the lean season? And I think that connects with the second question. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question for Vidya. Yeah, here. Oh, hi. My name is Sanchit. So first question is regarding how did you convert those 502 recipes into various nutrients? And then I was confused about the wages part. So how did you differentiate between casual, self-employed versus regular salaried wages?
Hello, I'm Anjali. I have been a Imana Fellow. I have two questions. First for Ateka. How did you calculate the household dietary diversity scores? What was the range? Because they looked pretty high in comparison to what we find in Indian scenario of 4 or 5 per individual. The second question is for Vidya. Vidya, you have beautifully mapped the activities. So are you able to actually calculate the energy expenditure depending on activities? And have you looked at the sun exposure activities and related it to some of the nutritional outcomes? Thank you.
Can we have the responses from this side? Okay, just one more. Yeah.
This question's for whoever wants to answer it. So obviously a lot of times when we do intervention work, we're putting greater demands on women's time. So from your experience, if any of you have any tips or advice on how to sort of manage that and to avoid doing harm.
Sure, I think I had one question about the roles that these women were using in reproductive labor. So the roles that these women were using in reproductive labor were the same as in standard practice across India. So they were the primary ones responsible for childcare and food preparation. And obviously that's impacted by the amount of time they are spending in the time transplanting rice. And so this constraint within peak agricultural periods on nutritional intake and food consumption practices is definitely an area of concern.
What's next?
I guess I have a lot of questions to answer here. So the first one on challenges of collecting time use data. So I think a lot of it is 24-hour recalls and versus the time diaries versus now new methods that are coming in for time use data collection. But mine was a large sample, about 960 women, so, and it was an illiterate population, so time diaries was not like the most ideal method. So I went ahead with the 24-hour recall, and I did it on a tab. So a good thing to, I think the introduction of tabs has kind of made it a little easier to collect time use data, because you can actually recall the time from the women without priming her if it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And you actually ask her how did she spend her time, and she has a time frame in her mind which she recalls. And that actually makes it easier. Paper surveys, on the other hand, have 15-minute intervals or 30-minute intervals, and those are often difficult for enumerators to understand, because you're recalling based on those intervals, and respondents don't think that way, because they have a certain time frame. So introduction of tabs had made it easier. And because it's a panel data survey, over time, the quality of data gets better. We did face challenges, but I think a lot of it was ruled out during the pilot testing phase. And there are some minute which we can chat about after the session. Regards to seasonality of the time use data collection, so we collected from each woman, we collected data once every month. And so that actually took care of seasonality, which is one thing that is not ever done, so we did that for 10 months. And in the methodology, we use individual fixed effects that automatically takes care of the seasonality elements, because we're looking at time changes and diet changes within the same women across time period. And with regards to the 502 recipes and wages question, the 502 recipes we did, we followed the Gibson methodology introduced by Harvest Plus. And we used that as a guideline, and then I modified a lot more. So we did a lot of focus groups, and then we asked women to prepare those dishes, about three women each dish, and then we averaged out the nutrient intakes of those particular regions. So that way, for every recipe, we had nutrient intakes for zinc, magnesium, everything. And the National Institute of Nutrition actually has nutrient intakes by raw ingredients, of the edible portions of raw ingredients, and they don't have it for mixed dishes. So we actually calculated for mixed dishes using the NIN handbook. So that's one. And for the wages part, there's a lot of debate in the literature about just wages itself, but village wages serve as the floor wage of opportunity cost of time. So if a woman is engaged in agriculture, that's the least amount that you can take for an opportunity cost of time. So I account for that. And I exclude women who did not participate in agriculture that particular day. With energy expenditures, I only have time use data, which is super detailed. There are FAO guidelines on how much of the workload goes in each of these particular activities. I could use that to calculate energy expenditures and then map that. But right now, for this analysis, I'm not using energy expenditures. Yeah, I think that you had one more question. I forgot, sorry. So I didn't account for that, but I guess the activities are such that are they in the household or are they outside? So that kind of takes care of that to some extent.
I think I had a question on the types of milk products. Yes, we did account for other milk products as well, especially when milk is maybe not fresh anymore. They start making mala and other products. At the same time, we discussed actually whether we should talk about dairy or milk. It's just that because we didn't look at all the products that they could use, we decided to stay with milk. But yes, we did indeed look at other products. And then there was, I think, a generic question about how to avoid taking women's time. And I wasn't sure if that refers to as researchers or as projects. Both, okay. As projects, I've had, different experiences in the sense that one of the things that we always say, or, even in the CG, is like we have to reduce women's labor burden and so on. And I think that we have to look a bit at the nuances of that. So we've had projects where one of the issues that we usually have, I work in a livestock research institute, we go for intensification or new breeds and so on. And sometimes they really are supposed to be kept in the household, and they entail some activities that they really are heavy on the women. But what I've seen is that what makes the difference is whether the women get the benefits or not. So we've had, we've introduced new breeds that needed to be kept in the household. And so this was pastoral communities, so the men were still going out with the rest of the herd, and the women would look after this livestock. But when we talked to the women, they were very happy. They said, well, we're extremely happy that we have more work to do, but we also have milk to feed the family, and we can sell the milk and make some money. So I think it really depends. I think we need to look better at the labor contribution and the benefits that you get out of that labor contribution, and those I think need to be balanced. Because, of course, I can talk a lot about the opposite case where you actually have intensification, a lot of extra work, and then you don't get any, women often don't get any of the benefits. Okay, maybe I'll give...
Yes, there was a question on how the dietary diversity scores were calculated. We basically used the 12 element of food group FAO guideline. And what I would say is, based on my art experience and surveys I've done, scores of 7, 8 are really not surprising to me. But when you now zoom into the specific food groups of interest, you still realize that the risks of micronutrient deficiencies are really real. Thank you.
We're coming to the end of the session, and I'd like to thank all the speakers for the excellent presentations and for also keeping to the time. And equity, gender inequalities, and empowerment, they are all three issues that everybody is concerned about. For the last 2 days, we've been just discussing this. And we also know that public health research is all about proving what is already known through robust evaluations and well-designed interventions. Thank you to all.